So this is John with Brainstorm Comics and Gaming, and I'm here with Mr. Sizzle, Chandler Zirkle. Before we begin, this is this week's Turning the Page. We have 5 topics to go over. I know I sent these to you on Saturday, so you didn't have a huge amount of prep time, but...
Work best under pressure.
Before we begin, we want to remind people to visit the Brainstorm Comics and Gaming locations in Walkersville, Maryland and Frederick, Maryland. If you're looking for a good day trip, we recommend the Frederick location. You can go to the restaurants downtown. There's lots of cool stores downtown. Or if you're looking for back issues and gaming area, you would definitely want to come out to the Walkersville location. What do you think of the changes that we've made to the gaming side there, Chandler?
I think it's definitely a lot of exciting stuff, particularly if you're a big tabletop gamer. There's a whole side room now. We're starting to open that up again with the restrictions being lessened and things like that. So some stuff that I know you wanted to do since one of the reasons why you bought this location in the first place, and then COVID kind of had other plans, but we're starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So definitely if you are a tabletop gamer or if you are a collector, I don't know another store in anywhere, any recent area, anywhere in the immediate radius, Virginia, Pennsylvania, DC, where you would find a back issue this size.
Yeah, we've added thousands of comics in the last couple months. And of course, we also want to remind you to LCS, like, comment, and subscribe to the Brainstorm Comics and Gaming YouTube channel. As you can see, we're adding more content all the time. We have some more ideas on the horizon. I don't want to spoil those right now, but those are on the horizon. So let's start with topic number 1. In an interview with Men's Health, Kevin Feige revealed that the popularity of a character within the medium of comics would not be and has not been a determinant factor as to whether a character would be introduced within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, stating that the beginning of the X-Men and Blade movies proved that the two were not intertwined in terms of how well the movies would do. Are you buying or selling Kevin Feige's comments?
I'm selling for the most part. I think what he meant to say, or I hope what he meant to say from that, is basically that, just because a character isn't necessarily super popular in the comics, so that doesn't mean they won't see the light of day in there. I think a downside of that is hopefully he doesn't mean that they're not going to utilize any storylines anymore from the comics, because I think that would hurt eventually sales, but I think that would just put a lot of extra strain on the writers to have to come up with completely original concept and things like that when you do have decades and decades of source material there. But I think what he was trying to say was in itself not necessarily drop a huge bomb on everything and make all the comic book readers angry, but I think the characters he used specifically in that example kind of hurt his argument, because X-Men were very popular in the comics throughout several different decades. They were popular when they first came out, very popular in the 90s leading up to that first series. X-Men movie, the animated series, very popular. Like Blade, sure, obviously people like the character, but I could understand that one. But X-Men were and have been very popular since their creation.
Well, even Blade, I think, was helped by the fact it was an R-rated movie and they did darker things than what most.
Wesley Snipes was very popular.
And Wesley Snipes was very popular. It just had a good cross appeal, which I think is also why Guardians of the Galaxy did so well, because it was an adventure movie, but it was also humorous and they were engaging characters.
Right.
I think what will tell whether these comments come to fruition long term is how well the Eternals movie does and how well the Shang-Chi movie does. Mm-hmm. Initially, the Shang-Chi movie did not seem to have that much gravitas. It didn't seem like too many people were overly excited about it. Same with the Eternals movie. I mean, yeah, people are excited about some of the actors in each one of those, but not maybe so much the characters. Now, Kevin Feige did go on to say that, yeah, Shang-Chi is more intended for the Chinese market, so it seems like they are trying to eye broadening their appeal outside of just Western countries. Mm-hmm. Like you said, the X-Men were popular. The comics weren't doing great at that point, but the fan base was already there. They've already been out there for 40 years at that point. And like you said, there was a whole generation of children that were introduced to it through the animated series. So when you put it up on the screen, whether they were reading the comics or not, they wanted to see it on the big screen. I think the two are symbiotic. I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other, and I think they can help one another. I think this is not something that you would expect to hear from Marvel's chief creative officer, though. It almost sounds like he's almost dismissive of the impact of comics. And
Yeah, I think you have to remember he doesn't work in the comic industry though. Like
but he does. He was named the chief creative officer like a
Well,
year and a half ago.
I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but like his background is not
No.
a comic background, which we have seen though from the other side of it with Jeff Johns that maybe that is for the best when it comes to
Being able to separate
cinematic
your...
and knowing Hollywood and knowing how to make movies and things like that. Just because you know source material doesn't necessarily mean you can transition and do that. And he has done a very great job building this Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't want to throw any shade or saying like he's a hack or anything like that. I just do worry, like you said, it is kind of problematic when you hear somebody who has been put in that position and has led in this role from that you would assume, is very grateful and appreciative of the comics, because without them, you would not have this Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is where all your source material comes from. Even characters like Shang-Chi and Eternals still come from that comic source material. So it's a little troubling to hear that. Like I said, I'm hoping it's more innocent of a comment, and it doesn't necessarily mean like we are never ever using a storyline that's already been done in comics. We are only doing like original content. Like, yeah, we're using the characters, but we're not looking at comic sales or anything like that. It's going to be all original, all new stuff.
Well, I mean, clearly they have Moon Girl on the horizon, and I told you there's a potential to make that character more interesting on the big screen or on the television screen, because I feel like they missed a lot of opportunities within the comics.
Right.
I think that there's two things that we might be able to discern from these comments. Number one, I told you that one of the things I thought as to why Marvel went with Penguin and Random House is maybe they can synchronize the release dates across the world a little bit more and maybe coincide it with the movies. Mm-hmm. And like I said, since he is the chief creative officer, that may be he may have pushed for that and been like, hey, if we can get these more in line with one another, we can do some cross-promotional things like that. Number two, I think that the stores out there who are constantly, I'm going to say crying for Marvel to help them in some way because the movies are doing so well. I think they've pretty much got their answer in this, and that there's no help for you on the horizon. Right. Like the movies are where we see the money. Now I don't feel that way. Now I do think that they should do, as I told you, the comic book shop locator thing, but only because that's a minor inconvenience for them. It wouldn't cost them anything. It would be an easy do. I mean, I tell you all the time, like thankfully our sales continually go up each year. But I think it comes down to how you present the product when people come into your store and how you talk to them and things like that.
Sure.
But I think those are two of the things that we can discern from that comment.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is going to be sitting in their chair afterwards telling you to go read the source material after any of these movies are done. The credits have finished rolling. I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon, which
is a shame.
It is, but I don't think, at least for me, it was not a huge surprise, because it seemed like they were already giving that message without coming right out and saying it. And even this comment still isn't coming right out and saying it, but it's kind of more of like, hey, like, if you haven't gotten the hint before, like, we're focusing on the movies. We don't really care about, like your particular shop or anything. Like, we're doing just fine with our stuff over here. We don't want a joint venture. Like, we're good. Like, you guys do your thing, we're going to do our thing.
But we'll keep an eye on that and see how it progresses as time goes on. So we'll turn the page on that topic and move on to topic number 2. After the success of Spider-Man Spider's Shadow by Brainstorm Comics and Gaming favorite Chip Zdarsky, Marvel is showing a commitment to the what-if concept by announcing more content by the aforementioned creator, but also more high-profile writers and artists. What if story would you like to see this top-tier talent tackle under this new imprint?
I think, in looking through this, I mean, obviously, What If is not a new concept. There's going to be an animated television show, which the creator of the director has already come out and said that, it is going to be an animated television show, but if that is like a detriment to you, or that's you somebody that snobs your nose at that, he said it is going to feel exactly like a Marvel movie. That is their goal. It is going to be utilizing the voice talents and things like that from the Marvel universe. So it is something that they are obviously invested in. It's something that's heavy, and it's something that's just really cool. It's a big, if some cosmic being were able to shake it up a little bit, shake the snow globe to see how the pieces would fall out, come what it may. I think in terms of the Marvel universe of where it's kind of sat right now, I think an interesting concept would be if you had, instead of where in the Marvel universe, Winter Soldier killed Tony Stark's parents, and that really messed him up and sent him on like a bad path, and he didn't know who it was, he just knew that they were murdered type of deal. If you had reversed that and said Tony was killed instead of his parents, and then Howard Stark, who was already, you know, throughout the years been working, you know, with S.H.I.E.L.D., Hank Pym, characters like that type of mentality, already a very smart, creative guy himself, just didn't necessarily utilize those skills for anything. At that point in time, you still have superheroes coming out, so what would he do? What kind of, you know, he's obviously been seen as more of a old school, I don't care as much about morals and things like that, and even though some people would argue Tony doesn't care as much about morals either, his dad certainly has a lot less of that, you know, good angel sitting on his shoulder type deal. So what would he do if his one thing that was kind of grounding him a little bit, even though he didn't overly appreciate his son, was taken away from him, was taken out? What would he do? Would he become Iron Man? Would he become something different? Would he become some like type of act of vengeance, come out more maybe Punisher style? Obviously not military trained, but something along those lines. I think that would be a cool what if story for someone to explore. I think it would have that tie-in that you could kind of use the movie universe. That would kind of be a good jumping on point. I said for people who, again, you just want a quick, you know, 6-issue miniseries of like, hey, what if this would happen? Well, this kind of ties into some things that were already going on in the cinematic universe anyway, so you wouldn't need even to have the backstory of, well, I don't know what Tony Stark is like in the comics, or I don't know what that happened there. You can kind of use that as a bridge to kind of help those people who just want to read a cool 6-issue miniseries without having to get 20 years of, you know, back issues to catch up on.
Gotcha. So for me, I want to first say that I love the new logo for the imprint. The imprint I think is very cool looking. I think it definitely helps brand it a lot differently than it was prior. So a couple of the ideas that I had is, what if Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko weren't screwed over by Stan Lee? That would be a cool what if story.
That would be a cool what if story.
Number two, what if C.B. Cebulski were still Japanese? That would be an interesting one. What if Axel Alonso actually cared about the main Marvel characters when he was EIC? That might have been a good one. But enough of the ones where I'm giving a hard time to the guys who ran Marvel. The real one that I had was, what if Peter Parker had not made the deal with the devil and allowed Aunt May to die? I think that would be a decent one to do, because you could go into it as to why Peter Parker should have made the decision, and it would give people, I won't say it would necessarily change their mind, but it would at least give them some flip side of the story as to why Peter would definitely make that decision, as opposed to the people who are always questioning, like, oh, you know, Peter would never have given up his marriage with Mary Jane and that, like, I think they could go very deep into it. I think you could easily do a 6-issue miniseries for that and go pretty deep into the character.
Still trying to get people to come around on that, huh?
Yeah, I am.
Well, we'll see. I think that's an interesting premise. I don't know if that would sway everybody. I think you'd still have some people
like I said, I think
pretty entrenched, but I think you're right. I think that has potential. That could be an interesting series. The only other main one I had, because again, like I said, I'm not as familiar. I know What If is not, for those of you that do or don't know, obviously some of you do, but What If is not a new concept. This is something that has been going on for Marvel for a very long time. So as such, there are some that I don't know if they have been done already. I don't have a wealth of knowledge of all the what if stories they've already tackled, but something that I thought was cool. And again, I try to tie mine, again, despite what Kevin Feige just said, to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just to get that appeal of people. You know, right now you do have a lot of people who are very familiar with what is going on. In the movie Black Panther, a lot of people like the character Killmonger so much, who is not a new character, is from the comics, but they liked him so much that some of them were sort of more on his side than Black Panther and really wanted him to stay the Black Panther, become king. So I think a cool what if to tie that in would also be, you know, what if Killmonger became Black Panther and he had killed T'Challa, like for real, instead of just thought he killed him and then he came back. He killed him, took over as king, took over as Black Panther, and then how far would he go with his mantle that he kind of, his credo that he stepped in there and said, you know, we need to take back what's ours. You know, we have been mistreated for, you know, generations and generations. We need to go out into the world. We need to make them know that we're here. They should be afraid of us. We have this advanced technology. They have nothing. They think we're farmers. Like, they have no idea what we're capable of. How far would he really go into that plan? Would he just be content taking over as the king, sitting on his throne, or would he really enact that? And then how far would he have to go until other superheroes, the Avengers, would step in? Because diplomacy, as we've seen through a lot of different, you know, Civil War, a lot of different things, like, that is a very tricky thing that a lot of heroes don't want to get involved with and don't want to necessarily step over boundary lines. How far would he have to go until the Avengers or somebody would show up at his door and be like, hey, like, you need to stop, like, this is not okay, we need to step in here? I think that would be a cool premise. I think if they really even wanted to, they could almost go the Berserker route and maybe have Michael B. Jordan come in and be, you know, co-writing whatever, be involved with the character, you know, have a lot of variance with him as the, you know, designed as Killmonger. I think that would be a cool thing that they could do. Like I said, I don't know that they would take it because Kevin Feige clearly doesn't care about that. But if he did, I think that would be a cool way to, you know, incorporate what people have already seen into a what-if story that they could easily just jump in and start reading.
Gotcha. I will throw in one more. What if Nick Spencer actually liked Captain America when he wrote it? You don't seem to have much comment on my...
He showed his true colors. Maybe Nick Spencer liked him more than anybody. He showed us who Captain America was all along.
So we will turn the page on that topic and move on to the third one. Joshua Williamson recently revealed that he was prepared to make a break for it from the prison known as Dan Didio's DC Comics. This isn't exactly fair. Prison, from my understanding, is a far less horrific place than Dan Didio's DC universe. But anyway, this was due to the reveal of the 5G universe that they were going to create and its impact on the wider DCU. The writer changed his mind once the Lex Luthor-esque supervillain was ousted from his position at the company. Is Joshua Williamson the hero we need and deserve?
I don't know if he's so much a hero as just that he is, I think, and we both agree, he's a talented writer. I think he just saw the writing in the wind and he said, hey, this is garbage and I don't want this. Like, again, and then, you know, Dan Didio, I think, thought for a long time he had people like by the short hairs and was like, well, you know, like, we have so many amazing like characters, like, you can't write, you know, you can't create one yourself. Marvel doesn't have these characters, we have them. And I think for some people who loved the characters that much, like Jeff Johns, that worked for a while, maybe a lot longer than it should have gone on for. But for, you know, Williamson, he was clearly like, you know, like, that's great, that's cool, I do love writing these characters, but this is hot garbage and I don't want to be associated with it, so I'd rather just leave and you can keep your toys and I'll go find some new ones or play somewhere else, create my own because this is garbage and I don't want my name to be associated with it. And I think that's cool that I don't know everybody would have taken that stand. And it's clearly that some people at DC, even though it seems like now after the fact nobody really wanted to do it, some of them were going to go along with it whether or not they had, and that could be for a lot of different reasons. Maybe they were a lot less prevalent. Williamson is still a pretty well-known name at this point. I wouldn't say he's like an A-list or the most famous writer in comics, but people do know his name, so I can understand why he might be willing to step aside, but some of the other ones might not have been capable of doing it. But I think it's cool. I think it shows that he does have like scruples and he's like, I won't just sell out and write whatever garbage the person in charge wants me to write. Like, I want to write something that's a good story.
Well, I know you and I both like him a lot. Nailbiter, I introduced you to that, and although you're angry with me because I haven't had the time to...
It's fantastic. You got to keep going.
And I just finished Ghosted over the weekend. I read all of that, which you're very angry about me finishing that one instead of catching up on Nailbiter.
You got to take it one at a time.
What I find interesting is Jeff Johns did stick around, even though he was not sold on the New 52 thing.
He was a broken man.
His Flashpoint led into it, and from my understanding, he tried to talk Dan Didio out of it for, I think, like the fourth or fifth time from the story.
Right.
Dan Didio apparently wanted to have done that for quite some time, and he kept being talked out of it.
It was going to happen at some point. Jeff Johns did all the damage control he could, and then he had a cool, great idea with Flashpoint, and it was kind of warped and abused and turned into something ugly that he didn't want to do. But again, especially then, I think even at that point, he was definitely very hugely successful, but I just feel like, from what I can imagine, based on everything I know now, I don't think he felt like he could really do much about it. He didn't want to go along with it, but I don't think he felt like he was in a position where he could have stopped it from happening.
Well, he's a DC company man. I mean, he was with the company for like 15 years at that point.
And he loves he loves DC. Like, he loves those characters. Like, you can tell, like, it definitely has been hard for him these last, 10 plus years or so, because he does have such an affinity for these characters. He loves them so much that he refuses to let some of them stay dead, and he resurrects them himself because of how much he wants them to be there. I know both of which you're not the hugest fan of, one less so than another. But he does love these characters so much, which I think is why he did stay. But he definitely was not. Like, if you go back and look, like, he definitely was not over the moon. He was doing what he had to do, but this was all, New 52 was all Dan Didio's baby. It was not Jeff Johns. He was kind of propping him up as well, because he knew Jeff Johns is a great writer. People love Jeff Johns. Like, this, like, we did this. Like, this is our thing, to kind of give it credibility, when in fact it was all Dan Didio's baby. And much like this 5G thing,
you could see it pretty much in Jeff Johns' titles after New 52 launched, that they were pretty disconnected from.
Yes. I mean, Aquaman specifically, and then and I would even argue that, like, Justice League, having read all 52 issues of it, by the end of that, I really do think that, even to the middle, that he was mailing that in, because he was like, look, like, I'm going to get to the end of it, whatever, but like, and at that point, he had his eyes on, he's like, well, maybe I can try to rebirth it, kick something in again, maybe get rid of all this bad stuff, and we can go back to what I wanted and what DC should be.
Exercise the demons.
He was hoping, looking towards the future, I'll finish this New 52 stuff, whatever, but I'm looking to the future to get this. And then Dan Didio also put his hands all over that and took Rebirth, which should have been a really awesome, amazing thing.
And it did start off that way.
It did, and then very quickly Dan Didio put his hands in it and muddied that up again, to the point at which that eventually Jeff Johns did finally say he had enough and split off and went away from the company for a while, because...
And I think that's why Joshua Williamson, I think, does deserve to be called a hero. Like I said, he did not put up with all that. He was like, he had apparently told them, like, once my contract is up, I'm out of here.
Yep.
And
went to one meeting, saw the layout, said, this is garbage, and I'm not going to write for this, so whenever I'm done, like, that's cool. Like, don't call me, I won't call you.
So I think we're pretty much in agreement. You're not willing to quite call him a hero, but you do think that he's a person that stands by.
I respect him a lot more for it, for being able to see something like the writing in the wind and saying this, because I mean, most people I talked to did not like the idea of what was happening, and Dan Didio was shouting from the mountaintops that this is genius, this is amazing, look at all these talented people I had, and it does give me hope to know that, well, one of those people whose names was his, and I was like, well, if he's willing to do it, maybe I'll give it a chance. Like, maybe it won't be that bad. But to find out now that he was like, I was not going to do that. I'm going to walk away and not be a part of it. I know that my suspicions were correct, that this was a Dan Didio baby, and it was going to be awful, and it was going to be, do terrible things to great characters. But it also gives me hope to know that he was willing to be like, yep, nope, I don't care.
I will say that DC made lemonade out of lemons, though, because they took, like, that core concept and have turned it into something far better.
They did a lot. Like, like, Dan Didio doesn't have complete idiotic ideas. He just doesn't know the characters and doesn't know what to do with them. Core concept for a lot of those things weren't terrible ideas, but it's once how much control and how much he wanted to put into it and where he wanted to take the characters is what made it so terrible. And as we've seen, like 5G, everybody went, ugh, awful, why would you do that? And now they did not completely get rid of it. Like you said, they twisted it, they turned it a little bit, but they used those talented writers that they had and said, hey, here's kind of the idea, what would you do with it instead of this? And we've seen through Future State, which people were a little unsure of, but now with Infinite Frontier and writing it in, it's working very, very well. And those writers are staying on, and more are now willing to come in, because it's kind of like you've burned the sage and the bad juju has left the building, and now it's safe to come in and to have these great characters and have amazing, talented people writing amazing stories again for these great characters.
So we'll turn the page on that one. I'm sure we will come back to it as Joshua Williamson. Apparently he's one of the architects of what's going on right now also.
Which I'm very excited. This comment that he said, like this interview he did, makes me very excited that he is one of the people, like the head writers in charge of what's going on in the future of the DC Universe, because clearly he cares enough and he gives a crap to stand up and put his foot down if something is not going to work well.
I think if Jeff Johns does come back permanently, and it sounds like he is working his way back into the fold, that he if those two pair up, that they can do a lot of good stuff.
Oh yeah.
But we'll turn the page on that topic because we went a little long on it. But so let's move on to topic number 4. We all want those things that we collect, in this instance, comic books, to accrue in value. One of the aspects of collecting that I preach regularly is, as you can attest, that you've heard me say it all the time, is that if you love a story, or if it has a special meaning to you, for instance, the first book you read, it can never and will never lose its value in your eyes. What are books in your collection, or ones that you would like to add to your collection, that meet this criteria?
I think for me, the first one that stands out in my mind is, well, what followed was not what I was hoping for. DC Rebirth #1. It was at that point for me. Before that, I was kind of reading Batman by Scott Snyder. I was picking up the individual issues for that. I had caught up with the graphic novels, and I was reading other things, but I was waiting for graphic novels to come out. I wasn't necessarily collecting at that point, but once I heard the hype about Rebirth, I had already been reading some of Jeff Johns' previous stuff. I knew that I liked him a lot as a writer. It gave me a lot of hope, optimistic for the future. It was at that point I decided, okay, I'm gonna go all in, at least for DC at first. And I picked up like 10, 11 more titles, and I really started collecting in that terms of it. So that one was kind of the book for me that was the tipping point that started my collecting everything that I have now. And I know that it's not like an incredibly like valuable book, and what happened afterwards was not nearly what we wanted to happen with Rebirth, and it didn't end up having that, you know, being that beacon of hope that we thought it was going to be. But for me, it holds a special place in my heart.
It brought back a lot of older readers also that were very
Yes.
frustrated with the New 52.
It was a very, like, it makes me nostalgic for that time, even though Dan Didio was still there, and that wasn't great, and there were other things I didn't like. It is a good, every time like I see that book, or I pick it up, or I flip through it again, and I take it out of the bag and board, it does take me back to that moment where I was like, this is really cool, this is something that I want to start doing, start collecting more. So that one for me is one that I have, which again, I know it's never going to go for $1 million, but I like it. It's always going to be like up on my wall. It's going to be something that I care about a lot.
So the first one on my list is pretty much everything from EC Comics. Now that one obviously is valuable, but you know, for me, it's not so much about the value on that one. It's the history aspect of it. I know that, you know, I have all these...
All about the Wally Wood covers.
Well, you know that I have all these nonfiction books about that history and everything that happened during that time period. The artwork was far ahead of its time. The storytelling was far ahead of its time. As much credit as Stan Lee gets for making a comics adult in the 1960s, that is almost as bogus as his treatment of his friends, because EC Comics was telling adult stories 15, 20 years before Marvel Comics even thought about doing anything to that degree. Mm-hmm. The impact that they had on the industry was so great that the industry pretty much teamed up against them in order to put them out of business because they were hurting their superhero sales. And I do think that was one of the reasons why they sold them out was like, oh, like they're starting to compete with us on this level. We can't have them do that.
Right, absolutely. So another one for me more recently is probably Daredevil #1 by Chip Zdarsky. Again, that is kind of the jumping on point for me for comics outside of DC. At that point, I was only reading things DC Comics. They will always have #1 spot in my heart, but he was a more newer writer on the scene. He was an artist turned writer. I actually jumped on the book based on your recommendation that you were like, look, like you like Daredevil, you like the character, like the Daredevil book has not really had a bad writer in like 10, 15, 20 years. Like this guy is
We reviewed
really
the
good.
first graphic novel together, didn't we?
Yes, we did, and you were like, he's good. You want to get in on this? Like this is a good story. He's a really talented writer. I think it's going to be great if you like the character. And it is about 30-ish issues in now, and I have loved every minute of it. It's been really awesome. The cover isn't anything spectacular, amazing, but like I said, it's kind of that sentimental value where, again, I don't think it's ever going to go for $1 million. But for me, at that point, it made me realize, like, even though I knew there is a world in comics outside of DC, and at that point I started reading more Marvel and independent books as well, a lot more independence. based on that. And then I knew that there was, I didn't have to stay in just my corner of DC. I could explore all of what comics had to offer, and that has been to only my gain.
And now he's come to DC to write some of their stuff.
Yes, so it's all full circle now. So now he's where I wanted him to be all along.
Where he belongs. My second one is a pairing, which may sound weird at first and to some people, I'm sure that there are some that will know why the two are paired. That is Aquaman 56 and Submariner number 72. This is the first DC Marvel crossover, but it was an unofficial crossover. The writer initially worked on Aquaman, and then he moved over to Submariner once Aquaman was canceled. In the end of Aquaman, he threw this thing into outer space. It ends up landing in the Marvel Universe and becomes a creature of its own. Again, just the importance within the industry is why I like this one. I love cool historical things like that, and I don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's why those two made that list.
I think that's cool. So the rest of these are things that I do not have in my possession, but I would like to have in my possession. Some of these are a little bit more monetary, and then I may not ever be able to get them, but I would like to have them. First one, namely, would be any cover by Jack Kirby. I have a lot of respect for Jack Kirby. I think he is like the greatest artist, creator of all time. Like we would not have comics without Jack Kirby, and that's not a hot take. I mean, a lot of people agree with that. Like, I'm not saying anything crazy. I'm not reinventing the wheel, but I do have a huge appreciation for him. So it could be his worst cover. I don't care. I would want something on my wall done by Jack Kirby. Another one is it's a really obscure one. I don't even know what it's going for, but Gil Kane is another artist that I really like from back in the day. I think covers are good now, and we do still have a lot of really talented artists, but in that golden age and silver age, there was just something special, and EC Comics especially was known for this, where a cover could just grab you and kind of tell a whole story like right on that front page without necessarily giving away the whole farm, but it was really important. They took a lot of time to go over that. And there's this one cover, it's the Atom number 36 by Gil Kane. I just think it's really super cool. It's the Atom's jumping out of a comic book, and he's just really stylized and awesome, and it just has that nostalgia feel to it, and it's just really, really cool. Again, I have no idea what it goes for. I don't know if I can actually afford to get it, but it's just a really cool cover that I've always kind of had my eye on, and something that I think would be nice to have up on my wall.
Now, if you had that one, would you get it graded and put it up on your wall?
I probably would, just because, again, anything from that era, I would try to preserve it as much as I could. Depending on the condition, I would maybe.
I just know you don't do grading normally.
Yeah, I don't typically, but something like that, I probably would get it graded and get it slabbed and put it up there just to preserve it. So at that point, if it does have any damage, it would not get any more damage. It would be able to be preserved in the state it was.
Well, my third one is another pairing that most people probably will not know why until I explain it. And that is Spider-Man Team Up number 5 and Savage Dragon Destroyer Duck number 1, the crossover. So, as backstory to this one, Steve Gerber was approached by Marvel and were like, hey, we're getting ready to relaunch Howard the Duck. Would you like to do this one-shot for us? And he was like, he thought about it, and he was like, okay, I'll do it, but under one condition. I want it to be an unofficial crossover with Destroyer Duck. And they were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, don't worry, you won't see my character in your book. You won't see your character in my book. Like, you're just going to know that's happening in the same place at the same time. And what he did in that time was do one of the greatest heists in comic book history, as he stole his character back. There were a bunch of ducks running around, and he had his character steal the real Howard the Duck and put him in the Witness Protection Agency, like relocation program, and renamed him and gave him a new look and stole his character back. Again, Steve Gerber was screwed over by Marvel. There were a lot of things that were supposed to happen with the character and the way things were supposed to go with royalties and such, and which did not happen. And he created Destroyer Duck as like an alternative and also as a way to launch legal battles against Marvel. Mm-hmm. So again, just because of the historical aspect.
Yeah. It's definitely got a cool story behind it.
Yeah.
I've heard that one before. It's Steve Gerber's a cool guy.
So I don't understand why you would go. Steve Gerber is like a tankerous person. Why you would go to him and ask him to do you a favor?
Yeah.
On the character that you stole from him?
You should have known what you were getting into bed with. But again, that kind of shows the hubris at the time, not really thinking about what they were doing. But
yeah,
he took full advantage of that. So the next couple I have are basically mainly just on the covers. Some of them are worth a bit more money. Some of them maybe not. But I want them solely based on the cover and the artist who did them. The first one is Amazing 300, just because I think it's just a really iconic, really awesome. Spider-Man is one of my favorite characters. I don't necessarily always regularly read everything going on because I've always said, I don't want to have to read 8 different series and have a crossover event every 3 months with a character, and Marvel really likes to do that.
Back at that point, you didn't have to.
Marvel really likes to do that with Spider-Man, so it's kind of hard for me to jump in and read at the level I want to, but I have always loved the character. I grew up watching the animated series. I really love Spider-Man. Even the Tobey Maguire movies, take them for what they were. I liked them a lot at the time. So this cover is just really iconic.
That book is quickly moving out of a lot of people's price range.
Yes, and I know that, so that is something that I would want. May never actually get it, but hopefully one day. The next one would be Detective 31. It's that really iconic cover of Batman in the background. There's the villain, the Monk, which is his first masked villain at the time that he faced. They've done homages to that a lot of times over the years, but I just think the cover, again, it just has that golden age, just really, really cool, creepy vibe to it. Really like the cover. I think it's gorgeous. I would want to have it again. Don't know if that's ever going to happen because it is one of those that, again, are up there. And my final one is Daredevil 16. It's a John Romita cover, and I like this one a lot.
John Romita Jr.?
No. John Romita Sr., the only John Romita that I recognize.
I know, I'm messing with you.
He has this cover, and it's a crossover, and on the front cover is Spider-Man and Daredevil together, and it's a very cool, iconic, again, has that awesome nostalgia feel where I just don't feel like covers are done the same way anymore. Obviously, John Romita, an amazing artist. I like both of those characters a lot. They're probably my 2 favorite Marvel characters. So to have them both on that cover, and it's just a really beautiful, well done cover. I would love to have that piece of art. Yep. So again, probably can't afford it, but would love to have that on my art.
I don't think that one's too expensive right now.
Yeah, I think of the 3, I think that one is the most in my price range that I might have to, depending on what happens, with the next Spider-Man movie, I might want to jump on that sooner rather than later. But
last time I checked, it wasn't that expensive.
Yeah, but I think it's just a really, really awesome cover by an amazing artist.
So my final one is, and continue with the trend in this episode of giving Stan Lee a hard time, Strange Tales number 181. It was Jim Starlin's commentary on what was going on in the Marvel offices at that point. So Warlock was on a planet being kind of tortured by 2 clowns whose names were anagrams for John Romita and Stan Lee. They were diving through all this trash, and they kept getting frustrated that they kept finding diamonds. They were like, "What's this?" and would throw away the diamonds and keep taking the trash out of the piles instead. From my understanding, a lot of the creative at that point were very frustrated with both of them, Romita and Lee. Romita was in charge of art. Lee was still pretty influential in terms of the stories that were selected. They were saying that they were giving these ideas and they were getting shot down because they were more modern takes than what those 2 were looking for. And there was a lot of big talent in Marvel at that point. Again, historical, but also the inside joke of the clowns makes me laugh. So,
good choices.
So, we will turn the page on that one, and I expect there to be comments about why I hate a certain individual. But moving on to topic number 5. We're going to give Chandler an opportunity this week. He's going to give me 5 pairs of characters. He's going to try and embarrass me. So the goal is for me to say which of the 2 characters came first. The real point of this is to prove to you, no matter how long you've collected comics, no matter how many comics you've read, it doesn't matter. There's always going to be things for you to learn or things you're not going to know. The most important thing is you have fun in the industry, with the stuff you're reading.
Right.
But I know you said you think you'll stump me on at least.
I think there's a couple here, a couple good ones. All right, so the first pairing that I have for you is, we're going to start off a little bit easier, get a little bit more obscure, a little bit weirder after that. The first pairing I have is Robin, the original Robin, Dick Grayson, or Bucky Barnes.
I want to say Robin was maybe 42, but I think Bucky appeared before that. I'm going to say Bucky, who was first.
Okay, the correct answer is Robin. He
Oh, was
first
he?
appeared in April 1940 in Detective 38. Bucky did not appear until March of 1941 in Captain America Comics #1.
Okay.
So it was close.
Stumped me on the first one.
It's less than a year. It's about 11 months apart, so it was close. But yes, Robin did.
I actually thought he appeared a little bit later than that. I thought it was like 42 that Robin appeared.
I was a little surprised myself, but
Yeah.
yeah, he came pretty, from 27 to 38, so not
Well,
that, not
especially
that
since he was
far
so
out of the
dark
gate.
at first. So
Right. It wasn't that long that he was putting the gun away in the nightstand until he had the child busting out of the tent circle to come out and help
Yeah.
him. All right, so the next two pairings I have.
Oh, and just as I have no advanced knowledge, as is obviously
Yeah.
just proven on.
I have not given John any of these picks.
On the first
I
one.
did them on my own. He doesn't know what's coming next. All right, the next two I chose that we would give the ladies a little bit of love. Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane? Which one came first?
One panel or just mentions?
Yes.
Because I want to say that Mary Jane was mentioned first, but I think Gwen was shown on page first.
That is correct.
Okay.
So Mary Jane was mentioned and was shown. If you want to go by her first
Shadows.
official appearance, there was a plant that was blocking
Yeah.
her, so you could not see her, and that was in June of '65 in Amazing 25. She had a cameo appearance.
And Gwen was 31, wasn't it?
In 42, and Gwen Stacy is Amazing 31 in 65. So Mary Jane's full appearance was not until almost, a year and a month later in Amazing 43. So a little while later, but yes, technically her first obscured appearance was before Gwen Stacy. So thought I was going to get you on that one. That was pretty good. Had all the information there. All right, the next one I have is Deathstroke or Taskmaster?
Let's see. Taskmaster was Avengers 196, I want to say. So that would put it. I'm going to say Taskmaster by a little bit. By a couple months, I want to say.
That is correct. It was May 1980 Avengers 195. So you were
195,
very close.
okay.
You were one off. Very close. I'll still give it to you for that. Deathstroke was December of that same year, 1980. He
Number
was in
two.
New Teen Titans #2.
Yeah.
Yes. So correct again. All right. The next pairing is Dr. Fate or Our Man. Two JSA. Yeah, going back very far for this one. Two JSA founding members.
I assume you mean the original Hour Man.
I do mean the original, the original Iron Man, the original Dr. Fate.
I'm going to say Dr. Fate, I'm pretty sure, was More Fun Comics. I'm going to say Dr. Fate.
That's incorrect. It was
Okay.
Our Man. Our Man was in March of 1940 in Adventure Comics 48. Dr. Fate was More Fun Comics, but it was in May of 1940. More Fun Comics 1950, or More Fun Comics issue 55. So he appeared 2 months later.
Okay.
So it was close, but Our Man did come 2 months before, and then they made their JSA appearance.
The fact I pulled out, it's like,
No, I mean, it was More Fun Comics, but you're still wrong, so. All right, so the last pairing for this round of Stump John, I have the Mandarin, the Iron Man villain, or Polka Dot Man, Batman villain.
I'm going to say Polka Dot Man.
That is correct. Polka Dot Man came out in February 1962 in Detective 300, and Mandarin was all the way forward in 1964 in Tales of Suspense #50.
I think I did pretty well.
Pretty good.
What was it 3 out of 5?
3 out of 5, not bad. Pretty decent batting average.
Very good batting average.
That's true.
So this might be a regular segment on the Turning the Page. If you guys have any suggestion for the name of that segment, let us know. Hopefully you enjoyed this one, even though I may have been a little salty towards
One or two people.
a lot of people's favorite comic book creator. I use that term loosely. But hopefully everyone had fun. Don't forget to LCS, like, comment, and subscribe to the Brainstorm Comics and Gaming YouTube channel. Again, visit the store. If you're looking for a lot of back issues, a lot of board games, visit the Walkersville location. If you're looking for a good day trip, visit the Frederick location. And you can come yell at me about my perhaps undeserved or perhaps very deserved hatred of people. Hopefully you enjoyed watching, and thank you for watching.